Did you ever think that living in an apartment could bring more than just noisy parties? I thought my neighbors were just complaining about the noise until I found out the truth about what was going on outside the walls of my apartment. I discovered that my wife was cheating on me with two guys, and they were spending their evenings here in my apartment. I was shocked when I found out, but I decided to find out more and find a way to solve this mystery. Today, I will tell you about this story and how I found out the truth about what was going on in my apartment. Yegor was already 33 when he met Kristina. A beautiful but thin, sickly-looking girl attracted his attention from the beginning out of pity and a desire to help. And later, when they talked and corresponded a little, he realized he had fallen in love. Egor was in the military and was often on the road, so they stayed in touch with Kristina on social networks. Kristina's profession was social work. She cared for the elderly. They would video call almost every night, tell each other the news, just share their thoughts on something, and sometimes let themselves get naughty. "I'll be there soon. I'll kiss you," Yegor said. They hadn't seen each other in 3 months, and he really missed Kristina. "I can't wait," she smiled, and that smile made Yegor feel warm at heart. Upon his arrival, after seeing his beloved, Yegor was determined to propose to her while he was in town. He arranged a nice festive dinner for Kristina at his home, and at the end of the evening he gave her a ring. She accepted without a second thought. He even thought she said yes before he could get the ring out of his pocket. After a very modest wedding, he moved his newly minted wife into his apartment, and once again left for work. Kristina was pining away in loneliness. Phone calls and constant networking didn't give her the full effect of her husband's presence in her life. One day, a friend invited her to an intellectual game, promising her good company and a pleasant evening. Kristina gladly agreed. Arriving at the appointed time at the appointed place, she met her team. Including Kristina, there were 3 girls and 5 other guys on the team. All of them, except Christine, had gone to university together and were in a pretty close relationship. Kristina liked the game, and she asked her friend to invite her more often. So she entertained herself until Egor arrived. During his presence at home, Kristina abandoned the game. The rest of the team took it with understanding, because she promised to return when Yegor was gone. And so it happened. The same night, when Kristina returned to the game for the first time after the break, their team won, and they decided to celebrate at the cafe. They sat until closing time, and their entire company had long since gotten tipsy. When it was time to leave, one of the men, his name was Boris, followed Kristina. He had been hinting at her unequivocally for a long time, and this evening he grew bolder and even kissed her. The alcohol in her blood did its work, and Kristina called the man to her empty apartment. And in the morning, they woke up in the same bed. Later, Boris came to her several more times, which skillfully brightened up the woman's lonely evenings. Yegor suspected something wrong when during the intimacy with his wife, he noticed small bruises on her. He asked where they came from, and Kristina hesitantly replied that she went with a friend to a dance class where she got them. The answer put Yegor's vigilance to rest, and they never revisited the subject again. Later, Kristina began to have affairs on the side not only with Boris, but also with 2 other members of their team. She did not hesitate to bring them to her house until one day, a neighbor stopped her on the stairs and threatened to tell Yegor everything. For a while, she forbade all 3 of them to come to her house, but the summer began. The vigilant neighbor went to live at the cottage, and Kristina took on the old one. When she told her friend about it, she twiddled her thumb at her temple, calling Kristina bad words. That was the end of their communication and going to games. On his way home, Yegor often caught the unhappy glances of his neighbors. A married couple who had just recently had a child and who lived directly above the apartment of Yegor and Kristina complained to him that their intimacy with his wife was very stormy and loud. According to them, he realized that the moans were not only heard when Yegor was at home. Neighbors complained about moaning from our apartment. "What do you say to that?" he asked his wife sternly that night. She was embarrassed and replied that sometimes in the absence of her husband watched videos of interesting content, so to speak, to relieve stress and brighten up the expectations of her husband from his business trip. Yegor was aroused by these words, and he believed what Kristina said. Autumn came. Colorful leaves fell from the trees, covering all the roads in the city. Yegor spent the last days of his business trip with sweet anticipation of his upcoming vacation. He decided to surprise his wife and paid for a trip to the sea in an expensive hotel. With that thought in mind, he returned home. As he stepped out of the cab outside his house, he met his neighbor, Grigory Ilyich, the same one who had threatened to expose Kristina. His face was serious. He did not even smile at Yegor, as he usually did upon meeting him. The neighbor greeted him dryly and asked Yegor for some time. He came in from afar, first talking about his life and his wife, and then saying, "Your wife doesn't waste any time. She's got men coming over, 3 of them." Yegor was taken aback. His pulse jumped sharply, and his back went under. He looked at Grigory Ilyich as if he had just uttered the greatest foolishness. But the old man's whole look told him that he was not lying. He thanked his neighbor for the information, and the latter shouted after him for Yegor to introduce himself like a man. Now there the husband put the whole picture together in his head. The haymakers on his wife's body, the moans the neighbors complained about. Everything was on the surface, it was just that Yegor himself didn't see it, but Ilyich didn't want to see it. Kristina was supposed to be home. Yegor called her from the train station when his train arrived. She greeted him with a happy smile and a hug. Seeing that her husband was out of sorts, she asked sympathetically what was wrong. Without blinking, Yegor looked at his wife. Suddenly appeared before him an unloved, about whom he dreamed of nights away from her, from a stranger, unpleasant woman. It even seemed to him that his wife smelled different, not at all native. Seen Grigory Ilyich. Egor began, and noticed how Kristina staggered and grabbed the door jamb. Told me here's something interesting. Kristina looked at him with a frightened look, her lips shaking. Yegor kept talking, and she grew paler and paler. Kristina slumped angrily to the floor, covered her face with her hands, and cried. She didn't deny the obvious. She simply told Yegor how it was, without hiding anything. He sat in the hallway on a stool and listened to her. "I'm going to sell the apartment," he said suddenly. "I can't live here after this. It's disgusting." These words made Kristina cry even harder. She asked her husband for forgiveness, but he shook his head at every one of her sorry. Yegor didn't cheat. He put the apartment up for sale the very next day, and because he intentionally underpriced it, buyers were found quickly. He spent the whole vacation divorcing and moving. Kristina, on the other hand, returned to her mother. On her salary as a social worker in a small town, she couldn't even afford to rent an apartment. Her mother cried for days in shock. Boris, one of the 3 men with whom she had been spending time, confessed to her that they had argued among themselves about whether any of them could get a married woman to be intimate. From such news and humiliation, Kristina was utterly horrified. After all, she had naively assumed that she simply liked the 3 of them. For a long time, Kristina thought about the whole situation and cried. She was no longer in contact with that company, and she didn't have time to find a new one. She tried to find some kind of part-time job so she could move out of her mother's house. But before she went to sleep, she had a lot of time to think about how the betrayal on her part had negatively affected her own life. At first, it was just a game that wasn't supposed to leave any marks. She just wanted to see what would happen, to try cheating, but soon she found herself drawn into a whirlpool of passion from which she could no longer escape. Today, I will tell you the story of how a wife, originally planning a minor move, found herself on the precipice of adultery. Nikita and Dasha had been together for 5 years. After they got married, they moved into Nikita's parents' old apartment, which they rented out for a while and then decided to give to their son. Nikita worked at a car dealership, and Dasha worked as an administrator at a private dentistry. Their relationship was quite even, without much quarreling. Here is just over time, Dasha began to show the unexpected side of his character. If before she assured her husband that she really likes her job and that she can earn, and not just sit at home and do nothing, now she began to talk more and more often about his fatigue from working with people. From time to time, she mentioned her girlfriends who were allowed by their husbands not to work because they were able to provide for the whole family. Nikita, of course, understood what she was getting at, but so far he could not see the possibility of making enough money for both of them. He himself was very much looking forward to a pay raise at his job. Just a short time ago, he had spoken to his supervisor and asked for a raise. He was told they would think about it and give him an answer soon. On the day they arranged for another conversation with his supervisor, Nikita was unfortunately not pleased. He was told that the company could not review his salary now. In the evening, the man returned home not in the best mood. He still had to tell his wife about this conversation. She seemed to be more worried about her husband's decision. As expected, Dasha was very upset. At first, she even became angry. She had really counted on her husband's promotion because it brought her closer, if not to a complete release from her job, then at least to a higher standard of living. She spent a long time that day blaming her husband himself for not being persistent, and for the rest of the evening, she did not talk at all. A week or so passed. The wife had moved on a little from her resentment and grievances, and one day informed Nikita that she had decided to take more shifts this month. The partner was just about to go on vacation. She had wanted to buy herself a new phone for a long time. Now was a good time to earn more. The husband did not argue with his wife, just took note of her words, and read in them a clear hint. "You have not given me gifts." The hint was understood. The man even began to think about how much and in what time frame he needs to set aside money for a new phone as a gift. It had been a month since I had picked up more shifts at my clinic, and the shift woman still wasn't coming out of vacation. Every once in a while, my husband wanted to ask her if everything was okay with her colleague, but he always came in the evening very tired, and the question completely slipped his mind. One weekend, Nikita woke up quite early. Dasha was no longer at home. She had left for the shift. He leisurely went to the kitchen to make himself some coffee, but he was distracted by an unexpected call on his phone. His close friend, Alexander, called. "Hi, are you awake yet? Let's meet." With concern in his voice, he said, "Probably something serious." Nikita couldn't remember Sasha taking him anywhere at this hour. They met in a cafe. Nikita had just ordered himself breakfast, as he had not even had time to eat at home. "Our Grishka, remember." He started his friend. "He recently went to put a veneer, and this pleasure is not cheap, you know. But can the man afford it? He owns several hotels." Nikita answered. "And why did you call me? To talk about new teeth?" He laughed. "How can I tell you? The thing is that he went to the clinic where your Dasha works. And after the visit, she apparently saved his number and started texting him from her personal number. He decided to brag to me about what a hottie from the clinic was hitting on him. I got the name and the dentist, and I knew right away." Nikita's appetite vanished at the same moment. He cautiously asked what exactly his wife had been writing to their mutual friend. He told him that she was openly flirting with him and asking to meet him. They had even sort of seen each other once, but nothing like that, just chatting. But she clearly had far-reaching plans. Nikita asked for Grisha's number and called him the same day. He discussed the situation, asked more about their meeting. It turned out that she had seen him one day when she supposedly had an extra shift. That is, it is likely that her partner did not go on vacation. Dasha simply provided an alibi for herself so that she could safely go on dates with other men. The husband asked his friend to make Dasha a date for one of her extra shifts. And just so we're clear, this is not just a meeting to chat, but a real romantic date, possibly with a continuation. And the continuation itself he will arrange on his own. Grigory, when he learned that he was flirting with the wife of his old friend, at first embarrassed, and did not even want to participate in the whole operation. But then he thought about it and decided that his friend needed help to finally sort everything out. On the appointed day, Grigory met Dasha at a restaurant, and Nikita was not far away on the street. They were having a nice conversation, and at the moment when his wife quite frankly started flirting with him, holding his hand and hinting at continuing the evening, the fake lover sent a message to his friend that it was time. Nikita walked into the restaurant and quickly approached their table. Dasha didn't even have time to yank her hand away. "How's work, wife? Do you have an itinerant shift today?" her husband asked sarcastically. Dasha paled, stared dumbly at her husband, and then lowered her gaze and tried not to look into his eyes. Grigory recounted all their conversations, and at the end he added, "And you have seen the rest yourself." The husband grabbed his wife by the arm so that she got up from the table, but the woman recoiled in fear. "I will not touch you. Let's go. Take your things from the apartment. Move out today," said her husband. Dasha did not resist. She understood that her marriage was over. At the beginning of the next week, Nikita went to her work to tell the director about how their administrator had set up a dating club for herself at her workplace. When her shift attendant found out that Dasha's husband had come in, she told him that this wasn't the first time Dasha had done this. When she saw a client come in with money, she immediately saved his number and then tried to start a relationship. Apparently, she was looking for a more promising and richer option. Testimonies of 2 witnesses did the trick. Dasha was fired from the clinic. She managed to rent a small apartment, but being unemployed, she could not continue renting it. So she moved in with friends for a while and started looking for a new job. Of course, she still had a good list of numbers of potential suitors, but none of them hurried to answer the annoying woman. And Nikita soon filed for divorce and began to live alone. And thanks to this situation with his ex-wife, he made conclusions for himself. And now he deliberately checked his future chosen mistresses for mercantilism. Fortunately, his friend Grisha was now also happy to help in this matter. Here is such a life story. Share in the comments what you think about this situation and the behavior of the characters. And thanks for listening to the story to the end.